David Moyes and his coaching team are worried they may get the sack on Sunday should West Ham United lose to Southampton at the London Stadium. That's according to the Daily Mail. And this article prompts two questions really for you. Question number one, do you actually believe they might sack David Moyes? If West Ham were to lose to Southampton on Sunday, do you actually see a scenario where David Moyes is dismissed Sunday evening? That's question number one. And question number two is, do you believe that they're worried about getting sacked? There's two different questions. And the article, in fairness, doesn't actually say they will get dismissed. It just states that sources close to the coaching team at West Ham are worried that they will get the sack on Sunday should they lose to Southampton. So it doesn't actually say their jobs are in danger, just that they're worried their jobs are in danger. So two different questions there. But there is a third scenario which hasn't really been discussed in mainstream media. It has on here. I can see your comments on videos and a lot of people want to see the scenario. And that is if we were to lose against Southampton, that the board dismissed David Moyes, but only David Moyes. His coaching team remain where they are. So Warburton, McKinley, Nolan, Nevin, they actually keep their jobs. One of them is even given temporary charge of the team. Because we've got 3 games in 7 days now. Southampton, Newcastle, Fulham. We've barely got time to breathe, let alone get somebody else in between the Southampton game and the Newcastle game. So there is a possibility that somebody would be employed from within, even if it's just on a short-term basis while we get someone else. So that is a possible scenario. But, like I said, the article is about whether or not they're worried about their jobs rather than whether they'll actually get sacked or not. But it gets you thinking kind of thing. And I guess, like I said, the first questions are, do you believe that? And then we'll discuss it hypothetically. Do I think they'd sack David Moyes? No, I don't. I don't think they would. If we got beat by Southampton, it's possible that we will be bottom Sunday night. If Bournemouth get something against Fulham and Southampton beat us, we go 20th. We go 20th in the Premier League come Sunday evening. Not a good situation. A really, really bad scenario to be in. But I'm not even convinced that that would get David Moyes sacked. The more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that he's here till the end of the season. Something would have to go drastically wrong between now and the next 3 or 4 games for them to pull the trigger. And with the next game on Wednesday, like I said, sometimes as fans we think, well, surely they should sack David Moyes because he's not up for the job. But sometimes I do wonder if the board looks at it and says, well, who's the best manager for the Newcastle game? Is it David Moyes? Or is it Kevin Nolan, for example, and they perhaps opt with David Moyes? Now, obviously, like I said, we think differently. We think, well, it's not Moyes or Nolan, and it could be another guy that currently isn't at West Ham. He would be a better fit. But that's just how I guess the board perhaps see it. So, do I think Moyes will get sacked? No. Do I think Moyes and his coaching team are worried about their jobs, though? Now, this is where it gets a little bit funny with me, because in the article it stated the reason they're worried is that the fans turn against David Moyes in the stadium, and that puts the pressure on David Sullivan, and as a result, David Sullivan sacks them. So their worry isn't, we might get sacked because we lose to Southampton. That's not the worry, according to the article. The article claims their biggest fear is the fans in the stadium turn against David Moyes and alerts David Sullivan, I guess, to the discontent among the terraces, and that means David Moyes and his team get sacked. Not the fact that we could be bottom of the Premier League. They're not worried about the fact that we're 20th. And that's one thing that needs to be clear. If David Moyes was to get sacked, it's not because the fans on Sunday are unhappy that we've got beat by Southampton. It's not that the fans are unhappy about the poor performances that we've seen for quite a while, or we're bottom of the table, that we've spent 180 million in the summer. It's got nothing to do with the fans' unhappiness. The fans' unhappiness has been ignored, I would argue. He's been given a longer stay than a lot of chairmen would have given him by now. I think if it was about the fans' feelings, he perhaps would have got the chop by now. At Brighton, they were singing, "You're getting sacked in the morning." They stuck by him. So that fans turning against him, I would argue that happened at Brighton. Very, very loudly it happened at Brighton, but yet still David Sullivan stuck by him. He wouldn't be getting sacked because of the fans. He would be getting sacked because with 10 games to go in the Premier League, we're 20th in the Premier League. That we spent 180 million in the summer. If we lose to Southampton, there's a good possibility that either Skamaka didn't start the game, or Ing started up front on his own, or Paqueta didn't have a very good game. Regardless, his new signings would not be playing very well against Southampton, because if they turn up and play well, there's a good chance we win the game. They are that good. Obviously, the other players need to turn up, but we know Declan Rice will turn up. We know that. We know Bowen will put in a shift. But they're not the issue. It's about getting the best out of the best players. That's the issue. But regardless, the fact that they're worried about their job because the fans may turn, I just found it a little bit strange, really. I thought it was a really weird thing to claim to some extent. But anyway, do I think they're worried? Well, we can take David Moyes separate from the coaches, because we've heard David Moyes speak about the possibility of getting sacked as manager of West Ham very, very recently. On the podcast he's done, occasionally it comes up about his job being in danger because of where West Ham were in the league. Even back then we were just outside the relegation zone. Moyes is not afraid of getting sacked. I don't think Moyes is afraid of being sacked. When you hear him speak, he says, I hope I get more time. But if it happens, it happens. I've been sacked before and know how to deal with it. It's not the end of the world. I believe I've done a good job. But if they decide to sack me, they decide to sack me. It's football. It happens. We move on, kind of thing. That's how I've always picked it up with Moyes. Now, obviously, the £5-6 million compensation probably helps him get over the loss of losing the West Ham job. But as a manager coming to the end of his managerial career, perhaps, I'd imagine there'd be a lot of disappointment from him if he was to get the chop, that he wasn't able to win a trophy at West Ham and it ended like this. Will he get a better job than West Ham in future if he gets sacked? I'd be shocked. So I think there would be a disappointment there. But going by what we've seen and heard from him, I think there's a part of it that he's almost accepted it a little bit, that he's not that bothered if he gets the sack. His coaching team, however, are slightly different. They're not on a healthy salary like David Moyes. Some of them, to some extent, ride off the coattails of David Moyes, and that happens. That's not unusual. Coaches following a manager from club to club is not unusual. Coaches relying on that manager to go get a job and take him with him, nothing new there. It happens all the time. Our next manager, whoever that might be, whenever that might be, will probably have coaches following him that will leave with him as well. It's nothing new. But when you look at them individually, take Nevin, he'd be fine. He's still got the England gig. He'd be more than okay to get another job after West Ham United. You look at McKinley. He was here in David Moyes' first tenure. He was at Sunderland with David Moyes as a scout, and then he came to West Ham. Then when Moyes left. He went to Stoke. He was assistant manager at Stoke, and he left in April or whatever. Then he joined West Ham in July. So he's had stints with Moyes, but he's also had, in between the David Moyes managerial periods, he's picked up jobs. Assistant manager at Stoke City in the Championship is not a bad gig to have, so he'll be fine. Warburton, he's a manager. He is a manager. Manager of Rangers, manager of Brentford. These aren't small gigs. These are decent jobs he's had. He will be fine in future as well. Kevin Nolan, the younger one. His CV isn't as glamorous perhaps as the other ones. He hasn't got the experience. But I think he'd be fine as well. I'd be surprised if Kevin Nolan didn't pick up a job. He's the one I expect. Do you know, when I discuss the possible scenario that Moyes gets sacked and all these coaches remain, I think if Moyes got sacked and some of his coaches went with him, I think Nolan would be bottom of the list, because he's got that ties to West Ham. He's got that relationship already with Martin Noble, which could be quite important for him on a personal level. I'd be surprised if Nolan was to leave West Ham, regardless of what happens to David Moyes. I almost expect him to be here, because again, there's always one or two, isn't there, that just outlast the managers, that go from manager to manager at that club. They stay at the club. New manager comes in, has him on his team, has that coach there. New manager goes away again, but that coach remains for the next one. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a familiar coach, somebody that the players can trust. Even when the new regime comes in, it's all right, okay, we're unsure about these lot, but at least we trust him. We can go to him if there's anything. And I think it's good for the new manager to integrate into the squad, to have that connection there. So I think Nolan would remain. But like I said, the article said that David Moyes and his staff are worried they might get sacked because the fans will turn against David Moyes on Sunday. And I just find it difficult to believe that would be the reason that David Sullivan pulls the trigger. He would have done it already. Do I believe they'll sack him? Not really. Is there a possibility he will be 20th? Yeah. I mean, at this minute, I'll be honest with you, I'm inclined to believe that we're going to win. I'm feeling a little bit optimistic for Sunday, actually. What it's based on, I don't know. I think, I'll tell you what it is based on, actually. At West Ham, not Sunderland, all right, at West Ham only. Moyes just gets a result when he needs to. Now, by hook or crook, he just does it. You know, you look at the ones against Everton, so on and so forth. You know the ones I'm talking about, Forest. Whenever he's up against it, he gets a result. And it was the same when he came in the first time round, he kept us up. Then when he came back a second time, we went into that sort of post-COVID tournament kind of thing. He got the results he needed to. And I think Southampton's one of these games I look at and I think, it's just one of those games that David Moyes, usually, that's his bread and butter, if you want. That's the games that he will win. And as long as he's winning them, I think we might stay up. I think we might. If we can get 3 points against Southampton and get 3 points from Newcastle and Fulham, then things will be looking a lot healthier. We'll be 30 odd points. We'll be thinking, okay, we can do this. We need another win and 2 draws or something, we'll be fine. And I think he might just do it. But this is where, if come Sunday we do not win, like I said, I believe that this game is David Moyes' bread and butter game. If we do not win Sunday, then we've got a serious problem. Should we have beaten Villa? Don't know, but we certainly could have done. But because of where Villa are, where they're playing with their manager and that, I kind of accepted that Moyes wasn't going to go and try and win that game. I don't agree with it, but I accepted it. But Southampton on Sunday, I think even Moyes knows that this is a must-win. It's not a must-not-lose, which I think the Villa one was. This one is a must-win, and he might just do that. And this whole article becomes a little bit, well, pointless in the end, but most news articles are. Anyway, that's what Daily Mail's reporting. If you've enjoyed this video, let me know your thoughts as well. Like I said, there's kind of 2 questions. Do you believe he'd get sacked? And do you believe that they're actually worried about possibly losing their job? I'd like to think some of them are, because they want to stay at West Ham and they want to be at West Ham and they want to keep working with the players at West Ham. I don't think they all feel like that, but I'd like to think there's at least 1 or 2 of them in that coaching setup would be gutted to be leaving West Ham, but you never know. If you've enjoyed this video, please do drop a like on it, subscribe to Hammer's Chat, and I'll catch you tomorrow.